Okay, so here we are at the workbench. This Xbox was completely useless up till now. Somebody, I don't know if they let it fall or what while it was plugged in, but if you can see this HDMI port, this is the one that goes to the TV. It's the customer complains that this is broken, they get no signal. And I can see, compared to the other, that there is some damage. So usually in here I would see pins coming separated from the plastic tab in there, and I don't see any there. And usually the other thing I would see is where it mounts to the board. Sometimes they come disconnected here. The third place I normally see it is under this bracket. These will push back. Well, I can't see under the bracket, but I'm going to give the customer the benefit of the doubt, and we're just going to change and put the new port in. So this is kind of a couple-step process, and I hope I have all the tools here in front of me. Yeah, looks like I do. All right, so I don't have a lot of battery on my phone. Hopefully I can make it through this without my phone dying. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm heating up the soldering iron. I am going to, I have a special kind of solder. Pardon my funny angle here. I haven't recorded a video from this angle in a while. So if you can see this, I hope you can. I have a different kind of solder here that's called quick chip or low melt. You can find this on eBay. And rather than using my regular solder, which is here, rather than heating this thing up excessively hot and then trying to wiggle this out and potentially damaging the resistors, MLCCs, the ICs, and other things on the board next to it, rather than doing that, I can melt this into the joints that we're trying to loosen, and this will actually, this alloy will lower the overall melting point of those joints, and then when we do add hot air, we should be able to wiggle this guy out a lot easier. At that point, we can clean it up and put our new HDMI port on, put it back together, and have a happy customer. So soldering iron is just about hot enough now to add this stuff, and we're just going to, I mean, and it's really powerful stuff, so we don't have to use a ton. One thing that also helps, tons and tons and tons of flux. And I use a pretty good flux that comes from Mobile Centrics. It's pretty cheap, it's very effective stuff. And we're just gonna melt this right into the joints. It doesn't matter if we use, I mean, I'd rather not use a lot because it's not really the cheapest stuff. But as far as getting too much on the board, that's not part of the equation, because we're going to clean it off when we're done. And it just melts at such a low temp. Now my soldering iron's actually at like 837 degrees at the moment. It doesn't need to be, but sorry if I'm blocking the view. I've got to get this in this side here. Got one more to do. Okay, I think it's in the anchors. So I'm going to turn it. I don't know how out of view you are, and I'm going to try to do this without dropping the camera. Okay, we got it in both of these pretty well. And then just for good measure, we're going to flip it over. Here's our port. And we're going to add some flux here. so I can see. There's one. I just got a bunch of it over here where I didn't want it, but because it's low melt, it'll come off easy, so that's fine. Okay. I mean, look, it just melted right into my hand. All right, so I cleaned all that stuff off that I spilled. You see, I've got no bridges, thankfully. Okay, now we're gonna switch gears. We are going to switch on the hot air. Here's the hot air gun. I've got it restricted down to this little nozzle so that I don't get a whole bunch of air on stuff that I don't want hot. We're just gonna go like this. And I will see that low melt when it melts again. Just making sure you're on the camera. And I can see the low melt starting to melt. There it goes. Which means our anchors are probably about to melt. Remember when I said I had everything I needed? I lied. I don't have any pliers over here. I don't have any tweezers. So this may get interesting. But at this point, usually, you can just let it get nice and hot. Man, I wish I had one of my other $5. There we go, we're starting to come up. We're gonna go nice and slow with this part as you pry the port off, because you don't want to rip any of the solder pads off. So we're gonna add a lot of patience here. Okay, so we have the old port removed. We're gonna take the heat off. And at this point, check and make sure we're still recording. We are good to go. We're going to add more flux to the area we're working with. We're gonna go just like this, and it's hot, so it's melting right off for me. I'm gonna take this solder braid and just clean this up. We are almost done. We're gonna get these nice and clean. And I got a drop over here. We're gonna get that off there. Okay. The next thing is to make sure that all of our holes are clean, and they are not clean. So what that means is I can't get the legs through because the backside didn't come all the way clean. So we're just gonna try to pick that up, and it looks like it's gonna cooperate once which is lucky for me because half the time this is where the hole fills back in and I've got to start again with the quick chip stuff. So thankfully on camera it's working for once. Okay, we have a nice clean surface, 4 open holes. Now, I'm not gonna mount this yet, but I'm gonna stick this in here to show you that that's how our new port's gonna sit and all of our pins otherwise line up. So what we have to do next is take some of the regular solder, and this, we're just gonna tin these pins a little bit. So I'm gonna get a little bit more flux just on the tip here. And we're gonna go just like this, get a little tiny solder ball. We're just gonna tin these a little bit. And this is the stuff I'm talking about. Those are tinned now, but now we have a problem where I've gotten one of the holes closed. This stuff happens all the time. And it's usually pretty frustrating, but that one came out. No, it did not either. All right. So that's when we go like this. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna fill that hole with the low melting stuff again. If you ever have a hole that you can't empty, there's 2 ways to do it. You can either do it that way with the actual solder, or you can cheat and you can go back to the low melt and it'll suck it right out of there. And I don't know why that works so well, but it works. So there we go. The hole is clean. They are tinned. So the next step now is we are going to stick this back on. We're going to make sure we have it really well in. And we do. Now, we're going to take an anchor. I'm like running out of battery, so I'm hoping that my phone doesn't die. I'm going to anchor this first one. And we're going to go just like this. I'm going to let that melt. And I have to pause video as a customer has just come into the shop. Okay, back where we left off. So you put the first anchor in, and when you do that, you're going to, while it's melted, kind of tip back a little bit so that all of these prongs are pressing hard, and then let go with the pencil tip and let it harden so that we are hardened in that position. And then we're going to come back, we're going to do the front one. And now we're pretty good to go that way. We got 2 more to go. So this side's not sticking well for me, which means what? More flux. Now, there are 2 schools of thought for how to finish this up. Some people are brave enough to run their solder tip over those pins. I am not. That's why we pre-tinned them. We're going to go back to the hot air and just hold it, and we will be able to see, or I will. I don't know how well the video will do it, but you will be able to see when the solder melts. And as soon as it melts, you can take it off. In fact, as always, more flux. Oh, for God's sake. For whatever reason, this heater goes into a protect mode, and right now it's, there we go, it just kicked back on. It wasn't giving me any heat for a second. Shouldn't be much longer. The flux is melting. They look pretty metallic right now, pretty shiny to me, which means I believe they've bonded. I'm just going to make sure, because even any one of these pins that actually does something, if it's not connected, then the port won't work. Yep, I think we're good. So that's pretty much it. We're gonna let this cool off for a couple of minutes and then stick this guy's Xbox back together. I'll plug it into the TV to show everybody that it works. And that's how you do it. That's how you stop. This thing was essentially, you know, completely useless. And we have once again turned somebody's waste into something useful again. So there wasn't a whole lot going on here. If we were going to scrap this for e-waste, there's hardly anything in these things. There's a couple of flip chips under here, one epoxy top, some memory chips along the side, and there's really not a lot going on. So anytime you can fix these, it's a good time to. There's the memory chips, there's that epoxy top, and it's not even that big. It might be 5 grams. So anytime that you can fix these consoles, definitely a good idea. So I'm gonna stop the video for now, and we'll stick it together. Okay. So here we have it. Everything's reassembled. I'm just gonna set it down and hope that I did my job right. It looked great, like you saw in the video. Everything was bonded well. So plug it in, and we'll plug in the power. So you can see everything fits firm in that HDMI port. So we'll just I hit the eject button because the customer advised that the main power was broken. Huh. There it goes. Oh, shoot, I didn't wait long enough. Okay, so it did work, and that must be, they said that the power is broken. It must be that their light was broken as well. But hitting the eject is a bypass, and as you see, the HDMI port is working. So I was scared for a second. Another one fixed. They could actually fix this. That's a whole little board that plugged in there, and it's like 4 screws that hold that in. They could be fixed for about $15, but the customer didn't care about that. You can turn these off and on with the controller. So Cool, another success.